What goes on inside the mind of Ian Russell? In this very special episode of The Bold Carper, we're going to find out.
Not sure. Do we keeping this fishing related? Because you don't want to know what goes inside my head when I ain't fishing.
So you're coming off what is probably one of your best ever winters, would you say?
Most definitely, yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, quick recap, what have you had?
Since 1st of December, 1530s, 540s and 250s. That's from 4 different venues over the winter. So that ain't a bad winter, is it? From 1st of December, mate, which is what I class and friends of mine class as winter. 1st of December till the end of February.
Looking at some of your reports, I noticed you have been quite lucky this winter in the fact that it's mainly only been you on the lakes, hasn't it?
Lucky. Yeah, I think it's cool. I think they call that Billy No Mates or something. Do you know what? The winter, I mean, we haven't had what you would term a really cold, bitter winter. It's been very wet, as we know, which means it's also stayed quite mild. But the very wet weather, and I don't blame them at all, tends to put a lot of people off. You know, I give, the amount of times I've packed up, everything is literally caked in mud, certainly from linear, and soaking wet is beyond it, mate. But I get home, the patio's covered in gear, and usually by the time you get home, it's stopped raining. That's the wind has picked up, by the way. It's stopped raining, so I can dry it all out. But yeah, I've packed up absolutely sodden more times than I can remember, mate.
Yeah, so you've got to be dedicated to do it.
Yeah.
In your experience, obviously, over all the many years you fish, would you say less people are going fishing in the winter now?
What would you say by that, the start of that? Would you say because I'm really old? You're leaning towards that, aren't you, Chris?
I went with experience, not old.
Oh, I know. Do you know, and it is bizarre, that's a good question. I had 3 trips on the Manor at Oxford, which were very successful trips. But I went up there, 3 different trips with 3 different mates, because I get bored of me after one trip. But seriously, all seriousness, we were the only ones on the lake most of that time on the Manor at Oxford. You know, you're looking at getting on for 40 pound fish, and 2, as I found out, 1, but 2 possible 50s. Yeah. No one there. There was no one. There was 2 people on St John's when I was there. It's been a crazy winter for that.
And actually, that sort of leads into spring, to be honest, because now I'm sure you're expecting it as well. We're expecting a lot more anglers to suddenly hit the bank.
Yes, there will be.
How's that going to change your fishing in particular?
Right. Well, I'm probably only going to have 1 more trip to Frimley because I don't want to be there when it's busy. Yeah, so I'll drop back on the day, mainly on the day tickets, which will be your linear venues. I know I've just said about being busy, but I'll emphasise on that because Frimley's a syndicate water, and the syndicate members pay quite a lot of money to fish there. I do winter guesting when it's quite with Mark, the owner's permission. Yeah. So I don't want to be treading on toes to people that pay a lot of money. So I'll probably have, next week I'll maybe do 2 nights on Frimley, then I'll go back on. So there's a different reason for it being busy. Then I'll drop back on when linear opens, as we know at the moment, it's still flooded. Yeah. I mean, they've lost a couple of weeks of revenue and angling, like, you know. So when the water drops in linear, I'll start going back up linear, mate. And I like that.
But when you go to play, people will be quite interested because when you go to places like linear, you can't necessarily always get in where you want, can you? I know on Tar Farm you've had to move about a lot.
Well, no, that isn't true. Tar Farm, Manor, and I think it's Hunt's Corner on the Go Catch the app. Yeah. So I have booked a couple of trips, filming trips at the end of March on Tar Farm. You can you can preempt where you want to be. That doesn't mean to say the fish are going to be there.
Is that what you've done?
Yes. Yeah. So you don't know where the fish are going to be, but you have to book on the Go Catch app. Yeah. So the rest of them, your Oxleys, is just St John's, and the other ones, the Brasenoses, you just turn up, drive round, and find where you can on a busy water, where you can actually. So it's not necessarily up there or any day ticket. Now busy ones about finding the fish. It's about finding a peg, and then you have to. And I've done this with a high degree of success over the years. Just turn up, drop into an empty one, and catch fish. Because I mean, we chatted briefly about it earlier, Chris. Certainly the linear fish, they learn where there's no lines quite quickly. And you would not all of them, but you'll either go out of range or they'll move into a lineless area. And for me, I've been very successful at doing that. A lot of linear anglers, I'm not knocking them. They'll turn up, lid off a bucket, spom in before the bivvy's up. Yeah. And I know that puts a grin on your face, and so, rightly so, because gone are the days, like I've just said, of walk around and find fish. You now find a peg. I will find that empty peg. and friends of mine are the same up there who are very successful. Solid bags or little zigs for the first couple of hours before you look at any inclusion of bait. Okay. And generally, you know, if the fish have moved into that empty area of lines, you'll get a couple of bites. And then it's worth putting a bit of bait out. You'll drive the fish off you, but then you're the last one putting fresh bait out. So it works for me. Yeah. I've become very good at doing angling in that style, like, you know.
So on the ones where you have to book, have you booked what you think are particularly good spring areas? And if so, yes. what is a good spring area?
I'm telling you, because then everyone has to book them.
Yeah, well,
behave yourself.
What sort of things are you looking for
right.
spring?
Well, what I'm looking for is you can't all get it, and that's not big-headed. And I'll explain what I mean is the years of going up there. So the years of going up there, it's not, you know, I would say experience, but that would make me sound big-headed. But the years of going up there has taught me where they're likely to be. I mean, they don't tell the carp that, but where the fish are likely to be at that time of year. Yeah. So on Tar Farm, I've booked a filming trip in pegs. I've got pegs 7 and 8, it's 2 of us going. Pegs 7 and 8 on Tar Farm Lake 8, because that is where past trips, or I've kept my eye on the past winters coming into spring, the fish tend to move into. Same this year.
Why is that, do you think? Is it shallower? Is it?
Do you know what, Chris? It isn't shallower.
Okay.
So I don't know. It's something they do.
Right.
In front, between the area, if we talk about Tar Farm Lake 8, there's obviously a features map. Yeah. Online you can go
all
to.
Of them got it,
and between 8 and 7, where I've done a lot of fishing in 7, early winter, there's a massive 25-foot deep trench. So I was fishing off the left of that in 15 to 16 foot of water, and then it drops right down. Now, whether or not, because again, Tar Farm shuts most winters with the flooding, whether or not them fish move into that deeper trench, we don't know, because they've always been closed. You've never been able to do a hard winter campaign on Tar Farm. They may well sit above that deep trench of water, and then just it's where they first emerge from. I don't know that, I'm guessing. Yeah. Onto the so if it's 26 foot, 16 foot now is quite shallow.
Yeah.
You know, in the thermoclines, maybe that is it, but they generally end up along that bit of bank early spring. You know, I fished it last March, and I was phoning Ian Roper early morning on the 3 mornings I was there. When Ian was working, he can come over and do my pictures. You know, I had 30-pound fully scaled, 35 common, a couple of 20s, but each of my 3 mornings, a 2-nighter gives you 3 mornings, obviously. Ian was over there taking pictures from that area. So this is why this spring, with work involved, bear in mind if it opens up again because of the flooding, it's quite deep there at the moment, that's why I've chose the area.
Yeah, that's interesting, because mainly over winter you're targeting the deeper areas, aren't you, that you previously covered in the middle and stuff like that.
Yes.
So as you go to spring, are you looking for more of the shallower shelves
and
stuff like that?
And like I said, if there's 26 foot here, a shallow area is incredibly 16 foot. And then as you come in closer, certainly along the bank to the right of peg 8, it comes up to 10s, where me and Omar caught a couple of fish on the zig thing, but from the other side, from peg 1. So yeah, you are looking for it to warm up, you know, and like I say, if it's 26 foot, 16's a bit shallower, isn't it?
Yeah, so as a general rule for anyone who's heading to any sort of lake in the spring, would you say start looking towards a slightly shallower water?
Yeah, you know, if you've got 10 foot, look for the 7s.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the sun's a bit higher in the sky. It is, well, they may not stay there all night, but certainly, you know, I learned on Tar, they would move to the last spring, they would move up into the 10 foot bit, and of a night you wouldn't get anything. Yeah. But from like 8 in the morning till about 11, you'd get a little flurry of bites. And then nothing again until the next morning. So I'm second guessing they would move into that, because the sun hits that bank on peg 8 quite a lot. I'm guessing they moved in there for 1 degree warmer or 2 degrees warmer, and then they dropped down when it maybe acclimatised with the rest of the lake. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's something that people typically say in the spring, is that the bites move to more daytime bites, because in the winter, particularly on Manor, you've been having most of your bites through the night, haven't you? Is that something you agree with generally?
4 till about 8:30 on the Manor was the bulk. I didn't have a massive amount of bites. I got lucky, I had some massive fish. Yeah. But the bulk of them bites I had, in fact, all of them were in that 4:30 till about 8:30 in the morning. And then it was cooked. Yeah. You know, the trip side. But again, the Manor, you know, I fished the Manor. I've been coming to Linear for 30 years. So again, you've watched it. The Manor, the road bank on the Manor and the brown swim, for whatever reason, has always been a good cold weather area. So and this is a go catch app. So I booked, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which is 2 nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 weeks on the bounce in peg 2, and you know, 320s, 240s, and a 50 are spread out amongst them trips. So it worked for me. You know, whether or not I'll ever get back in there again or not,
never.
Because having watched it over the years, and there I know, I mean, when I had spike years ago at the manor at £46, that was out of peg 3, which is now peg 2, which is all peg 2's all the old peg 3, peg 2 has always done bites for me in the coldest of weather. You know, why they want to be there is up to them, but I know why I want to be there, because they are generally within that sort of area, between about 25 to 28 wraps in that general area. The lake bed out there seems to be flat and smooth, and then you hit a gravel bar at about 22 wraps. So maybe that's it, because it's consistent.
Yeah.
We don't know that, but I do know that's where they usually are.
Okay, so you've slightly covered depths to look for. I mean, in the spring, some places you've got weeds starting to come up. Does that bother you at all or anything like that? Like, are you a bit more cautious looking for spots or not really?
No, I mean, if we're talking, they will move slowly out of their winter areas. I mean, in peg 2 on the manor, again, they'll probably still be in that vicinity, but they might be up.
Yeah.
They might be up now, so you'll nick them on 5, 6, 7 foot zigs. You can get them at that range without wrapping them up. If fresh weed is coming up, of course it's going to draw them, because you've got a fresh influx of food.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will look for that on given venues. And again, if I move away from linear, I've got a new syndicate available to me this year, which I've joined, which I'm really excited about, because I haven't been there before, and you've got to learn that. Linear, having been there for so many years, you generally, like we've just spoke about, you have half an idea where to go. And I'm not saying it gets boring, but it gets a bit humdrum.
Yeah.
So this new syndicate, I'm really excited about, which is up not too far away from where you live.
Yeah, I know, in the Cotswolds, glorious part of the
world.
And
I've got permission to bring Omar with me on occasion, and your good self, sir. So yeah, it'd be nice to learn that as well. Yeah. But yeah, I'll be looking for areas of fresh weed, crunchy weed, you know, because that's where the food is, like, you know.
In terms of food, then, are we up in the bait? Is the bait changing from what you would have used in the winter?
Let's, you know, natural. I mean, maggots aren't natural to carp. We call them natural because they wriggle around. Yeah. So getting away from natural food is a big plus for me. Financially, because I do buy my maggots, like, you know.
Omar says you don't know.
Well, Omar doesn't know anything, does he? I mean, who? I love him. You know, I'm lucky if I use worm, I'm lucky Dynamite helped me out with the worm, but I do buy maggots from Harefield Tackle. Moving away from that, obviously with my job, you get the ice cream, the paella, and the coinciding pellets and fluids and all the hook baits. So I'm looking forward to. And again, I get my corn, obviously, from Dynamite. So I'm looking forward to that being involved more than little wriggly things, you know, less messy fishing, shall we say.
Yeah.
Volume of bait, you know, that's very venue related. When I was on Raisby in the winter, I would get there and put a bucket. I mean, I'm talking the winter. This was absolutely freezing cold, fishing 18 foot of water. And I caught a lot of fish that winter, including Mike's up to £54 in January. But I fed really heavy because they wanted it. Yeah. Whether that was because it was unusually deep or not, I don't know. But I know it worked for me. Little yellow and white pop-ups, big buckets of corn, 10mm boilies, and again, pellets.
Did you fish it into the spring as well, or?
I tend to move off of Raisby in the spring because it's not
getting busy.
But it's going to sound rude. Your good weather, the better weather anglers would turn up. See, this is where the social, my job, is fantastic, but it also lets you down. Yeah. Now I'm talking about where I've caught the fish from, how many wraps, what I've caught them on, and then you stop getting into them available pegs because people put their...
You blow your own fishing, basically.
You do, which has happened on the manor at Oxford. Now you can't get in that peg till, well, I've booked dates in peg 2 in November.
Okay.
On the Go Catch app, because you can book that far in advance, and I had to. So I moved off Raisby so I do use, where the venue I think it's relevant, I'll use a huge amount of bait in the winter, which won't change as you come through spring then. But, you know, with Frimley, I was, like I covered, I was making 10 bags of maggots, PVA bags, catapult size, 10 of crumb, 10 of 10mm, firing them all round the swim, less disturbance. I do believe on Frimley, if I'd gone and slammed a load of, bear in mind I do two nights, till the lunchtime, I think it would have spoilt my fishing. But I got away with it. So between Raisby and Frimley, same result, big fish, totally different tactics.
That'll be interesting for people to, like, what made you draw that conclusion that you had to feed like that? Because I can guarantee 90% of people would turn up, put the marker rod out, clip up, spom, 10 spoms.
Yeah, I'm not taking it away from them because we all do it our own way. You know, I've used the PVA bag thing for so many years on venues that I mean, look, when I was on Swan Valley, you were slicing the lead under the willow tree and you'd fire PVA bags of bait into the willow tree, so it hit the branches and fell straight down, just a little plop. Again, it's you adjust your tactics, certainly feed tactics, to whichever venue you're going to. You know, and because I've got a vast amount of years behind me and a vast amount of venues, you tend to build up that portfolio of lakes in your mind, which pegs blah, 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 you know, the best way to feed them.
But you still like, in that scenario then, you still like the little clumps of bait. You wouldn't just ping boilies, single boilies.
Are you on about in the winter or
spring or any?
Right, for the winter, I like I mean, on Raisby you weren't allowed to use maggot or worm, it was banned. So it was on hard baits, you know, corn, pellet. Yeah. Where I can use maggots, I do like to introduce them as feed as well as on top of the hook bait, because it's, you know, it's a draw, isn't it? Whether or not it is or isn't, it works for me. Yeah. The only way you can prove or unprove that is bang, wallop, off the rod goes, and it's worked for me. So where I can use maggot in my mix in the winter, I invariably do all the time. Yeah. And if I can't, like when I was on Raisby, then you don't.
Yeah, but moving on to spring, it's going to be mainly boilies.
It'll be boilie. It'll be more food content, let's call it, than the maggot and the worm. So, which is how I've always fished anyway. I want to introduce the boilie. I definitely want to introduce 6 and 8 mil pellet. You know, and if you can get them feeding on that lot, it's proper food for a minute. And it works for me. It works for everyone I know, to be fair. You know, and it saves me a lot of money. Debbie can buy more handbags and boots and stuff and training shoes. But yeah, it's you know, it's not just a financial thing, because, you know, people said to me all winter buying, mate, I will spend money on what I need it takes to catch fish. I go fishing to catch fish. You know, there was a fella did make a derogatory comment when I put a post up about the PVA bags. Oh, it's all right for you. You know, 20 quid at a PVA. Well, yeah, but on that trip, I had 2 40s of 50 and 3 30s. Yeah. 20 quid.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it is. Of course it's worth it. You know, I go fishing, and it is a line I use a lot. I don't go waiting, I go fishing. I'm always constantly striving to make a bite happen. And that if it means using a 20 metre roll of PVA, then and if I had to buy it, I would still buy it, because hence I buy the maggots anyway. Yeah. So I would go and buy it because it's a successful way for me of catching fish, which is what I go to do.
Yeah, so covered spot choice, bait, rigs, pretty much you're nearly 99% Ronnie. Are you going to say, yeah, Ronnie's through spring?
It'll be, right, it'll be, this is a quick one. It'll be a 3-inch, either wafter rig or Ronnie rig in a solid bag. It'll be a Ronnie rig on a stiffer or like a mono boom or a braided boom if it's close in, or it'd be a short zig. There you go, covered it all.
So basically, you don't need to change your rigs with the seasons.
No, I don't change anything. You know, and we've got asked a question before about, do I change from autumn into winter? No, I use a size 4 lock hook. These are big fish. You know, they're not scared of hooks. They're scared when they hook them, but they don't. I mean, you look on the bottom of the swim on the. There's so much underwater footage now. It's twigs, there's stones, there's broken mussel shells, there's debris. I don't find down because I don't want to hook a 40-pound fish on a tiny little. I mean, it makes mine do, and they're successful, but I do what I do.
Yeah, so you're not that particularly concerned with stealth necessarily, because that's what some people
are. You say stealth, I'm on about rig-wise. My rigs, you'll look, they'll be the tidiest they can possibly be. The last metre is everything. But stealth, like I've already just said, like I'm friendly, it is stealthy to put PVA bags out and not a spom. Yeah. So you're on about rig-wise, not approach-wise with freebies. If that rig doesn't look right to me, it's in the bin and another one comes out. It has to be straight, you know, not necessarily with braid, obviously, because it will bend up and whatever it does. But there'll be the tidiest rigs you'll ever see will be on my rig board. Yeah. So do we call that stealth, or do we call it sensible?
Yeah, well, I guess some people go through finding down, and like you've already covered before, in the winter where they're using smaller hooks, and then they'll pick a hook bait which is brown and not yet. You use a lot of bright-ish hook baits as well, don't you? So you're not that concerned. You're obviously not that concerned about that.
I'm more concerned about A, getting on them, and B, getting them feeding.
Yeah.
That's it. If you get them feeding, I mean, I've seen and used over the years in my learning curve, it's some atrocious rigs and still caught fish on them. You know, I do a lot of tutorials where customers they're showing me photos of these fish and all that. Then they show me their rig board and I'm like, oh, scissors, give me scissors. So getting them feeding, find them, get them feeding, that's the key.
Yeah.
It is though, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know, unless you'll get them on singles at range, get them feeding, and then any rig, all within reason, will get a pickup. Whether the rig, the mechanics work or not is up to you. But
so when do the solid bags come into play for you then?
Anytime.
Is that more of a searching method, not on the spot?
Well, no. Also, if I'm putting a lot of pellet out, like I do sometimes at Linear, again a conversation we've had, Chris, a solid bag over it with a little waft or a 3-inch Ronnie is perfect because again you're mimicking what's out there, you know, and you're drawing them to your bait as well. But there's no. I'm a weird angler, mate. You know, if I did ever write, which I'm never going to do, write a book, it would be called My Way with Carp, because I don't conform. And I don't follow trends. No. And like we sat there yesterday, and I did say to you, I just do things. Sometimes, you know, I've had customers say to me, "Why have you done that?" Oh, bang, and you get a bite.
Because you don't really change your lead system much either, do you?
No, I fish a lead clip.
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah, or a solid bag, you know.
Yeah.
It'll be a lead clip. Yeah. I can't remember the last time I fished. I'm not obviously not a fan of what you would call rotary helicopter rigs.
Why is that?
I don't know. I have done underwater filming before, and I believe a lead clip is more sensitive to the bite indicator.
Okay.
And the helicopter isn't. You know, they could move and pull.
There's a lot of movement. Yeah.
They can be. Only stuff I've found, but that isn't the only reason. You know, I'm sure a helicopter at long range with a stiff hook link sometimes make it more convenient, less tangling, or what I do, because I've refined what I do over 150 years. Rarely tangles anyway, Chris, you know, so I find and do you know, if you watch these films, some very well names in the last year, in their own angling, they're saying, I prefer the lead clip. Not because of me, because it's their own findings. You know, they've been through the chod rig up here and the helicopter system here, and most of them now, these are people I look up to as well. They're on lead clips and all now. So
yeah, I think definitely from writing about fishing for the last few years, everything seems to have gone. It doesn't necessarily always look simple, but definitely everyone who's successful is simple.
More often than not, it's
usually a Ronnie. To be fair.
Yeah, it is. Mate, yeah. You know, years ago we used a 360 a long time ago now, and that got very bad press. So I found my own way around that rig to make it as successful, but less, if you like, the hook, the swivel never used to get caught up in the net when you lift the net. Then I went on, I made like a stiff boom with a long shank hook on a little chod section. I called it the flick rig. Yeah. And I made it as a joke. And Tim Paisley asked me why I called it the flick rig. And I did say, because nearly every time I flick it out, I've got a fish. So, and coming on from that was my early Horton days. And coming on from that, the Ronnie, you know, the Apache, Steve Cliff up at Linear showed me it when it sort of burst onto the scene. And it was like, mate, that just makes so much sense.
Well, that's a good question for you there. Can the Ronnie ever be bettered? Because I would say again, 90% of people probably using it now.
Yeah, I mean, it is the same sort of end mechanics, should we say, as the 360, which was a spinner rig, you know, but cranked right over. I don't think so. No, where could you go with that? You know, it works.
Because you were around when the chod rig was popular as well, and people were saying that.
You was around.
Well, yeah.
Here we go, age again. Yes.
You've seen it all, is what I'm trying to say. So,
yeah, I mean,
this sort of rig development seems to have come to that and almost sort of stopped now. Like, there's people go like messing around with different things, but nothing has become as popular as that. No. Now,
if we've got a bit more time on this, the stiff hinge rig was further developed, should we say, by Lewis, Nigel and Terry on Yateley. And I'll tell you how it come to Yateley, and this is the honest truth. I was fishing with a guy called Gary Wallace, who doesn't go in the paper, one of the finest anglers I've ever been with, the most natural fisherman. And he was fishing an amnesia boom. When I went on to Harefield, I was fishing an amnesia boom with a great big split shot. You had to put the split shot on the right angle as well to lean the size 4 super specialist down with a hair, right? Gary Wallace, who I met, he's fishing Fridays and Saturdays only, catching some good fish. What are you doing then? And he had a boom with a loop each end and a little tiny amnesia link like that. Okay, now I took that, I started using that, and we were blitzing places, literally winter, summer, spring, blitzing places. I took that rig on a trip to Holland, where Alan Welsh, who was quite well known at the time, I don't know if he still fishes, Alan, was fishing on the Carpart Lake. Okay. And he came to Holland with us, and he looked at this and went, bloody hell, that's different. I mean, it's like loops everywhere, but the amount of fish you're catching, now this is the truth, he took that back to the Carpart Lake, and to be fair to Terry, and I've sat with Terry a lot, and he said, we saw that on Alan Welsh's, it was a straight little boom. They then made it out of the stiff monofilament between Lewis, and that's the truth. So the stiff injury really is down to Terry and Nigel Sharp and Lewis Reed for their development of it. But they got the initial idea from this rig from Gary Wallace, and Mickey Kavanagh was using it as well years ago. You know, these are Kent anglers. So that's where, you know, I know we've diversified there a little bit, but that is also interesting in the development of rigs. But then going on from the stiff hinge rig, obviously it became the chod rig, which was Frank Warwick. Yeah. You know, and Terry again then got rid of the boom and put this certain curve, which is something like that, and I think they tell you, on a chod rig, and there you go. The chod rig become very popular, should we say? So just a little bit of diversity there.
No,
but
it's a good bit
interesting
of
anyway.
There,
you know.
But that's what I mean. I feel like there was all that was going on, and now we're at the Ronnie. Everybody's using it. Yeah. You've been using it for how long? 5, 6 years?
Yeah, more? Probably. Let's say 5 years, maybe, mate. Yeah.
And you obviously.
I haven't changed.
You're not even trying to attempt to change anything else because it's working for you.
It works for me.
And it just seems to keep working. And do you think rigs blow at all, or?
No, again, I'm going to bring it back to, I mean, if you're fishing a single hook bait, they might see it and veer off. But once you get them feeding, how can a rig, because they're eating. Once, you watch 5 20-pounders in the edge, within 5 minutes, you can't see the bottom. So now they're not seeing the rig, are they? No. So it's all stirred up, there's dead leaves coming up and fish bashing into each other. And I'm sure if you critically balance it, and which I've seen, that rig will also waft up. Yeah. There's not saying that's going to spook them because they might just turn and grab that anyway. These are creatures of nature. They eat.
And we will do a product plug here. You're using a certain hook on it all the time now as well, aren't you?
I'm using a size 4 lock. Yes. And the shape of the hook as well makes it. When I started using the lock, I was bending I've done it with shrink tubing, right? And I was bending it right over like I was doing with the long shanks I was using previously. And I think I got a couple of because by bending the lock hook over, as far as I was, to be fair, Chris, I think you were closing the gape so much, it was working against you.
Basically.
So now the shrink tubing straight, so the size 4 lock is sitting up. And when we get a pickup, you'll get a pickup. And I've done so well on it in the last, I've been with AMC now 13 months, and look at the results. And it is boring. Every time we do a film, I go,
well, this is the thing, because it's like,
works, Chris. It works. It doesn't it doesn't knowingly let me down. So, I'm sure there's been times out there when I haven't even had a bleep and something's gone and got rid of it. But that part of it we don't know. All we can answer that with again is when the bobbin hits the rod and you get a bite.
Okay, so let's stick with the Ronnie. If you weren't allowed to use it, I'm going to put you on the spot. Right. Say a venue banned it. I have actually seen places that have banned Ronnie rigs.
Why would they ban it, first of all, before I answer this question? Why on earth would they ban a Ronnie rig?
I'm not 100% sure why. Some places don't like curve shank hooks either, do they? So they ban it maybe because of that. I don't really know. I have to speak to a venue.
Well, you could tie a Ronnie with a wide gape.
Yeah. Ali's used it with the Cassians and all sorts.
There you go. So it's not a curved shank rig, really. No. But no, I will answer that. But that's just food for thought. Why on earth would a fishery ban a rig that is so successful unless they didn't want you to catch them fish?
Well, exactly, yeah.
Which is a bit bonkers. Right, if I went to a venue, then it would have to be a wafter rig, like a small hair rig. I mean, I haven't been to one yet, whether you can't use Ronnies, but then I'd revert to either my solid bag or the solid bag rig, which is a wafter rig, which is again is a size, usually a size 6 lock hook with a little wafter sitting, balancing like that in the bag. If it isn't a Ronnie, like we just said earlier, then I would have to incorporate that into it. But I'd probably say I'm not going to go to that venue because I want to use a Ronnie.
Can't use the Ronnie, I'm not going.
It's successful for me. But again, I don't know why fisheries would ban it. You said you've seen fisheries ban it.
Yeah.
Fine, I haven't seen that and I haven't visited one. But yeah, I'd have to revert to either a hair rig, which I haven't had to do yet, or just a little wafter rig, mate.
Nice.
You know, because if you come away from a Ronnie on a pop-up, you've got to come away from a stiff hinge rig because it's a curve. You've got to come away from a chod because it's a curve.
Yeah.
The whole pop-up world, really, you should just say you ain't use your pop-ups here, aren't you? And they all curve.
Actually, sticking on that theme then as well, because I know from watching Ali a lot, Ali's happy to use a Ronnie for a bottom bait, a wafter and a pop-up. You the same?
I've done the same, yeah. Oh.
You'll use it for all three?
Yes.
You don't think it affects the mechanics at all?
No.
Still,
I think when they
if
pick
it's
it
lying
up,
flat.
and come on, when they pick it up, I think the majority of the time, because nothing works 1,000,000%, we know that. The vast majority of the time, when they pick it up, they're done, mate.
Yeah.
They're pricked and they're off. So, you know.
It's certainly been the case for you this winter.
Yeah, that's mate, yeah.
So, to wrap up, because we've been chatting for quite a while, very detailed chat. What's in store for Ian Russell then through the spring? What's your targets? What's your plans?
Do you know what? Because it's going to sound rather wishful, should we say, wanting. I would like this year, because I went for about 18 months, and it's a bit, we all fish for big fish. I went, quite why you go through these patches, I do not know, not changing anything. I went for about 18 months without, and I had lots of 39s and 38 without a £40 fish. I've had 40s in December, Jan and Feb. I'm going to try and catch one in each month of the year. And I've got a paper diary and I'm booking lots of work in, and I've got them little windows where I go with Omar and I'm doing some filming with Daryl later in the year, starting. I'm going to try and pick a venue which gives me a fairly good chance each month of achieving that.
That's a very tall ask.
It is
special if you did it.
It is a tall ad, but let's wait and see at the end of the year. I'm sure it won't happen, but you've got to, you know, that's my thing. I've set myself, and the syndicate of just joining is only got 3 of them in. So that will be quite something else, but I'll make sure I go somewhere else during that month to give me an even chance. So who knows? Why not?
Nice.
Why not?
And a final message to the viewers at home. What are we saying? For spring ahead, just get out and go fishing, I guess.
Go fishing, mate. The weather's nice. Look at today. I know I've got this on because Omar's made us sit in the shade, but it's really sunny out there, look. And we're sitting in the shade with our coats on. Go fishing, enjoy it. Don't get stressed of it. Leave your troubles outside the gate.
Sweet.
I'll catch some fish.
See you later.